Detective Sean Whitaker had handled over 100 death scenes in his 15 years with the NYPD, but when the call came in at 9:02 a.m. on a cold Monday morning, something in the dispatcher's voice made him sit up straighter. Not panic, not urgency, just confusion. Possible DOA, Upper East Side, no signs of trauma. Private security called it in. You're nearest. The address was high profile. A 22nd floor apartment in the Windmere, one of the most secure residential towers in Manhattan. $10 million a unit, a place where death should come with notice and lawyers. Whitaker took the elevator up with a building manager who said nothing during the ride, only passed over a guest badge and wiped his hands nervously on his slacks. The apartment door was already open when he arrived. Inside was silence, not the kind that lingered after music, but the kind that settled after something final. The victim, Lenora Vance, age 31, was seated at her kitchen island, head resting lightly on her forearm. Her posture looked so natural that it took him several seconds to process she wasn't asleep. The coroner was already present. So was a private doctor, off the record, hired by the family in advance, as the rich sometimes did when their lives edged too close to reality. Vitals were flat when I got here, the doctor said. Pupils fixed, no pulse, no trauma, no external indicators. She's been dead at least 45 minutes. What was she doing? Having coffee, looks like. It's still warm. Whitaker moved slowly around the room. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle. The place was pristine, minimalist. Half an avocado on the counter, a phone left face down, and beside the phone, just inches from her open palm, sat a folded sheet of thick white paper. Plain, untouched, no markings, no writing. Whitaker slipped on gloves, picked it up carefully, and unfolded it. Blank. No words, no pen pressure, not even a watermark, just a perfect square of high-quality paper. Folded once, precisely. It wasn't a note, it was a message, but what kind? By noon, the apartment had been sealed. Crime scene tape fluttered uselessly in the hallway as the medical examiner began her work. I know what it looks like, she told Whitaker quietly. But this doesn't feel natural. Not at her age, not in this setting. Poison? He asked. No evidence of it. No smell, no skin reaction, nothing oral. What about her phone? Unlocked. No recent calls, no unusual messages. The last text was from a friend confirming dinner plans for next week. But it was her email that gave Whitaker pause. 2 days earlier at 2:08 a.m., she'd received a message from an encrypted address. Subject line blank. Body blank. Attachment, a scanned image of a single sentence typed in courier font. Do you see it yet? It was the only thing in the email. No name, no signature, no way to trace the sender. That alone would have been strange. But the attachment, its file name, was stranger. Elroy case file PDF. Whitaker froze. We knew that name. Thomas Elroy had died 3 months ago. Same borough, same quiet collapse, same blank sheet of paper found on his nightstand. That case had never gone anywhere. Me called it natural causes with no medical explanation. Whitaker had signed off reluctantly. Something about it had always bothered him. Now, with Lenora Vance, it wasn't just a hunch anymore. Someone was repeating it. Detective Sean Whitaker sat alone in the precinct's digital archive room, the harsh fluorescent lights giving everything a clinical edge. On the screen in front of him blinked open a cold case file he hadn't seen in over 3 months. Case file 417B, subject, Thomas Elroy, age 57, occupation, freelance economic consultant, DOD, August 12th. Cod, idiopathic cardiac arrest. Scene, no sign of trauma, forced entry, or defensive wounds. Evidence recovered, 1 white folded sheet blank, positioned on a nightstand within reach. The similarities were uncanny. Same unexplained death, same lack of struggle, same blank sheet of paper. Placed, not discarded, almost ritualistic. Whitaker pulled up the scene photos. Thomas Elroy had been found sitting upright in a reading chair, eyes open, expression calm. No sign of distress, no pills, no needles, no trace evidence. Just a man who had stopped existing in a room that still felt lived in. The white sheet on the nightstand had no writing, no fingerprints, no trace of ink. It had been dismissed by forensics as non-evidentiary. But now there were 2. And Whitaker didn't believe in coincidences. Elroy's background was clean, at least on the surface. No enemies, no debt, no pending litigation. He lived modestly despite his Wall Street-adjacent consulting work. His only living relative, a sister in Maryland, had described him as quiet, careful, maybe a little paranoid. Paranoid how? He used to cover his laptop webcam with tape, she told the original investigating officer. Said people were watching, that they wanted to know what he knew. Whitaker flagged that. He reached out to her now. She picked up after 3 rings, her voice tight. I thought that case was closed. It was. I'm reopening it. He heard a pause. Is it happening again? Yes, Whitaker said. Another death, same pattern. Silence on the line. Then, he got a letter a week before he died. Wouldn't let me see it, but he read it twice and burned it in the sink. Whitaker leaned in. What did he say about it? He didn't. Just that it was true. Whatever was in it, he believed it. That night, Whitaker walked past the office break room and heard 2 uniforms chatting. You hear about the lawyer on the east side? Dead. Just like the old guy in August. People dropping like flies lately. City stress, man. You never know. But Whitaker did know. He walked back to his desk, opened a legal pad, and drew a line down the middle. Left column, Thomas Elroy. Right column, Lenora Vance. No history of illness. Both. Found alone. Both. Seen undisturbed. Both. Email contact trace prior to death. Both. Unmarked folded sheet. Both. Time of death. Early morning hours. Both. He added a final detail. Blank message implied meaning. Both had been told something. Something that didn't need to be written. Something that couldn't be written. And yet somehow had still been received. At 1:42 a.m., he found himself standing alone at the window in his apartment, watching the city breathe beneath a layer of fog. The folder on the table behind him contained both cases, both photos of the blank notes. 2 dead professionals, different backgrounds, different boroughs, same silence, and in his chest a sense that something was accelerating. He stared into the dark and thought of the question from the anonymous email. Do you see it yet? No, but he was starting to. Detective Sean Whitaker didn't believe in ghosts, but the building he visited next made him reconsider. 160 West 83rd Street, a pre-war apartment block with ivy-clad brick, ornate ironwork, and a faint scent of mildew that clung to every stairwell like a memory. And a super buzzed him in, said little, and returned to smoking by the door. People in the building didn't like visitors, especially when they asked about death. Apartment 6D had belonged to Sophie Tran, a 24-year-old data analyst found dead in her apartment 6 months earlier. Case closed. Cardiac arrest. Natural causes. Whitaker had reopened it without authorization because Sophie's name had shown up in one of Lenora Vance's browser histories. A Google search sheet had run just 4 days before her own death. The search had been deleted, but not before the cloud sync had cached it. That made 3 victims, not 2. And all 3 had blank notes. Inside Sophie's apartment, the new tenant, an art student, was gracious but distracted. I didn't change much, she said, waving him inside. You're welcome to look. Creeps me out, honestly, dying alone like that. They said she was healthy. Whitaker walked the space slowly. The furniture had changed. The rugs, the paint, but the bones of the place were the same. Sophie had been found in bed, on her back, hands by her side, her pillow untouched except for a sheet of folded paper sitting dead center. No ink, no writing. He stood in the bedroom now, staring at the ceiling. There were no signs of surveillance, no secret compartments, but something lingered, a weight. He checked the file again. Sophie had also received an encrypted email the night before she died. Subject line, blank. Body, blank. Attachment, a single PNG image of courier font text. You are the third. Back at the precinct, he pulled all 3 case files together. Victim 1, Thomas Elroy. Victim 2, Sophie Tran. Victim 3, Lenora Vance. All had received anonymous, encrypted emails. All died quietly, neatly, with unmarked white paper nearby, and now it seemed all were linked by something else. Awareness. Each had encountered the other, digitally or indirectly, just before their death. Thomas had emailed a contact list to an encrypted server 10 days before his collapse. That list included a name, S. Tran. Sophie had searched for Elroy's obituary the night before her own death. And Lenora? She'd searched for Sophie, dug through local articles, used a Tor browser, rare for someone in her profession. They weren't random targets. They were links in a chain. Someone or something was eliminating them not because of what they'd done, but because of what they'd learned. The next morning, Whitaker received a package, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of white paper, folded once, blank, no fingerprint trace, no DNA. He unfolded it under the light, and for the first time, something changed. There was a faint impression, barely visible, but there, a pressure trace from a typewriter. Someone had written a sentence and erased it, but under forensic powder, the words bled through. The fourth has already been chosen. Whitaker's mouth went dry. He didn't know who the fourth was, but he knew exactly who had been sent the message. Detective Sean Whitaker stared at the message under the forensic light, trying to process what it meant. The fourth has already been chosen. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration. Whoever was sending these messages had a plan, a sequence. Elroy, Tran, Vance, each had died after receiving contact. Each had left behind a blank note, and now the message had arrived for him. But the sentence made one thing clear. He wasn't the next to die. Someone else was. Someone already in motion. Whitaker called Liv Maddox, an analyst with the NYPD Cyber Crimes Division. Sharp, tenacious, one of the few people left in the department who didn't hot ask him if he was okay when he started chasing ghosts. He showed her the paper, the trace marks. The envelope it came in, smooth, sterile, no postage, no markings. It was hand-delivered, he said, no doubt about it. Security footage? He shook his head. Building system glitched last night. All data from 2 to 4 a.m. is gone. Let me guess, she said. So is your browser history. Maybe your email log. Whitaker's silence was confirmation enough. Liv sat down across from him, opened her laptop, and tapped into a private darknet index. I've been tracking the source of those encrypted emails, the ones the victims received. They're bouncing through Tor relays, of course, but every single one has one strange thing in common. They're routed through a compromised node that used to be part of a military testing program in Nevada. Whitaker frowned. A test program for what? Information suppression, psychological control, propaganda studies. It was called Echo Path, shut down in 2016, allegedly. She leaned in. I think this is the fallout? Liv pulled metadata from the image Elroy had received before his death. The one with the words, "Do you see it yet?" It contained a hidden comment embedded in the PNG file's hex code, not readable by normal means. It read, "Observation is infection." Whitaker stared at the phrase. Someone thinks just reading these messages is dangerous. Or, Liv said carefully, they know it is. She showed him the timeline again. Elroy reads a message, dies. Tran reads about Elroy, dies. Vance finds both, dies. Whitaker investigates all three, and now someone else. The fourth is in motion. The pattern was accelerating. Whitaker's head began to ache, deep and sharp, like a warning. He had to find the fourth person before it was too late. He ran a triangulation query, cross-referencing the 3 prior victims' contact histories, web activity, and digital overlap in the week prior to their deaths. One name came up on all 3 lists. Julian Mercer, age 42, systems architect, previously contracted by the NYPD for database security work, had exchanged brief emails with Elroy 2 years ago, had connected with Sophie Tran on LinkedIn, had been part of a legal discussion board where Lenora Vance had posted several times. Nothing directly suspicious on the surface, but the digital threads were there. Whitaker drove to Mercer's apartment in Long Island City immediately. The building was unassuming, glass and steel, bland and quiet. Security let him in with a flash of his badge. No one had seen Mercer since the day before. Whitaker knocked 3 times. No answer. He had the super open the door. Inside, the air was still. The apartment was spotless. Neat rows of books on cognitive science, a sleek home office setup, and on the kitchen counter, beside a still steaming mug of black coffee, a folded white paper, blank. Whitaker moved through the apartment slowly. He found Mercer in the bedroom, fully clothed, lying across the bed, eyes closed, chest still, dead, just like the others. The ME arrived within 30 minutes. Time of death estimated at less than an hour before Whitaker's arrival. That changed everything. The fourth victim had died after the message reached Whitaker, meaning Whitaker hadn't just been warned, he'd been tested, and he had failed. Julia Mercer's body was wheeled out on a stretcher just after 6 p.m. The forensic team worked in near silence, as if the room itself demanded quiet. Detective Sean Whitaker remained behind, gloves on, eyes locked on the blank paper he had sealed in an evidence bag. It looked so simple, but simplicity was a mask. Mercer's death meant the pattern wasn't just repeating, it was escalating, and whoever was behind it wasn't trying to avoid attention anymore. They were leaving breadcrumbs. Whitaker drove to Liv Maddox's place in Brooklyn, the sky going dark above the FDR Drive. The city pulsed outside his windshield, honking horns, flashing red lights, a blur of noise and people and motion. None of it felt real anymore. Liv lived in a converted loft above a butcher shop, her space crowded with monitors and empty coffee cups. The hum of cooling fans filled the air like white noise. She didn't look up when he walked in. "Mercer's dead, isn't he?" He nodded. 15 minutes before I got there. She cursed under her breath and spun her laptop around. "I've been thinking about the message embedded in Elroy's file. Observation is infection. It's not poetic. It's literal. Think about the chain. Every victim read something. Not just read, understood. That's the trigger. What kind of message kills people? Not a normal one," she said. "I think it's a cognitive load, an idea too large to carry, something that corrupts the mind by forcing it to hold two incompatible truths." Whitaker frowned. "You mean like a paradox?" "Exactly. But engineered, weaponized. Imagine a concept that rewires your perception just by being seen." She clicked open a folder on her screen labeled Witness Theory. In 2014, DARPA began testing models of exposure fatigue, information so overwhelming it caused test subjects to break down mentally. They called them cognitive hazards. Only certain people were affected, people with higher pattern recognition thresholds. Whitaker looked up, like analysts, consultants, lawyers, data architects. Exactly the people who've died. She leaned forward, voice low now. What if this isn't about murder? What if it's about containment? They ran Mercer's recent online activity. The last file he opened, 15 minutes before death, was an audio recording, 32 seconds long, titled Pattern Line B. Encrypted, digital signature traced to a private server hosted in Iceland. They broke it. The file was nearly silent, but when Whitaker isolated the frequencies, he found a faint, whispering voice, unclear words, murmurs in loops, like hearing something just outside of language. Liv filtered it. It became a question. What happens when you witness what must not be remembered? Whitaker closed his eyes. His pulse was racing. The victims weren't random. They were chosen for their capacity to recognize something hidden, to witness what others wouldn't see. Back at the precinct, Whitaker opened his own personnel file. He read through every line of his 15-year record until he found it, a form buried in the appendix. Temporary assignment, behavioral surveillance unit, duration 6 weeks, status closed, date February-March 2018, supervisor Letier M. Kearns. It hit him like a blow to the chest. He'd been part of this, whatever this was. He just didn't remember. Not yet. Detective Sean Whitaker sat in his car outside the precinct, hands gripping the steering wheel long after the engine had stopped. The name on the form from his personnel file echoed in his mind. Letier M. Kearns. A ghost in the system. He remembered nothing about those 6 weeks in early 2018, just a sudden transfer, vague references to off-record fieldwork, and a return to homicide with a bonus he couldn't explain. At the time, it had felt like a clerical anomaly. Now it felt like the missing piece. Whitaker found Kearns' last known address in the department database, listed as medical leave pending retirement. The system gave no contact number. He drove there anyway. The house was in Staten Island, quiet, gated, one-story, curtains drawn, a mailbox full of flyers no one had touched in weeks. He knocked twice, waited. No answer. He was about to leave when the door opened a crack, and a voice rasped from the shadows. "You shouldn't be here." Kearns? Silence. Then, "You were supposed to forget." Inside, the house was sparse, dark. The air smelled faintly of mildew and rubbing alcohol. A television played static in the corner, and dozens of manila folders were stacked along the walls like insulation. Kearns looked older than his age. Gaunt, eyes bloodshot. One hand shook slightly as he poured whiskey into a chipped glass. "You're digging in places that have been buried for a reason," he said, dropping into a chair. "You found the notes, didn't you?" "I found 4 dead bodies," Whitaker said. "Same thing." Kearns lit a cigarette with hands that couldn't stop trembling. "We weren't supposed to keep records. The unit didn't exist. It was a pilot program. Joint task force with the NSA, some behavioral tech out of DARPA. We were testing cognitive filtration." "Filtration of what?" He exhaled smoke. "Truth." Whitaker stared at him. Kearns continued, voice hollow. "We were told that some information was incompatible with sanity. That there are structures, patterns of thought that can't coexist in a functioning human mind. The goal was to build filters, people who could see the data, then pass it through without retaining it." Whitaker said nothing. Kearns looked up. "You were one of them." Whitaker froze. "Your recall was wiped, not chemically, through exposure therapy, memory destabilization, induced disassociation. You passed. You came back clean." "And the others?" Kearns crushed the cigarette out. "They didn't." He stood and pulled a file from one of the stacks, slid it across the table. Whitaker opened it. Inside were names, all 4 victims. Elroy, Tran, Vance, Mercer. They'd all been part of the program. All failed filters. Kearns spoke again, voice now cracked. "And we didn't realize what we were doing. The notes, those blank pages, they were mimics, triggers, not words, but arrangements, shapes, echoes of the original payload. Something slipped through, something self-replicating. A virus? A signal." Kearns leaned in. "It doesn't kill by force. It kills by exposure. Once you've internalized the contradiction, it sits there until you remember." Whitaker whispered, "What was the contradiction?" Kearns didn't answer. He handed over a sheet of paper, folded. Whitaker hesitated. "It's inert," Kearns said. "This one's mine." He opened it. Inside, a single line. "The filter is never outside the system." He looked up. Kearns was crying now. "You were never investigating this, Sean," he said. "You were processing it." Detective Sean Whitaker left Kearns' house just after midnight. The air outside was still. No wind, no sound. Staten Island felt like a different world after dark. Quiet in a way Manhattan never was. But his mind wouldn't quiet. "You were never investigating this. You were processing it." Those words followed him all the way back to the city. Every red light, every quiet intersection felt like a checkpoint in a maze he hadn't realized he was running. He didn't go home. Instead, he returned to the precinct and unlocked a records terminal in the basement, a hidden archive buried under layers of security protocols. Clearance codes from his 2018 assignment still worked, barely. What he found wasn't just unsettling, it was horrifying. The folder was labeled Project Sigil Subprogram, Witness Cascade Class, Restricted Cognitive Data, Human Trials. It contained over 200 pages of redacted reports, psychiatric assessments, surveillance transcripts, and audio files. Most of the names were scrubbed, but he knew the faces. Elroy, Subject Wedo 3 Tran, Subject 11. Vance, Subject 08. Mercer, Subject 9. Whitaker, Subject 12. He stared at his own ID number for a long time. Each file followed a similar pattern. Subject exposed to encoded stimulus. Monitored for 6 weeks. Results: varying degrees of deterioration. Resolution: cognitive reset. Attempted, except one line stood out in Whitaker's file. Subject 12 displayed exceptional stability. Minimal residue detected. Recommended for reintegration and observation. He had been the control group. The one who could survive the message. The one who could carry it forward without breaking. At 4:17 a.m., his inbox refreshed with a single anonymous message. "The 5th is ready." No subject line, no sender, just a link. He clicked it. A video, security camera footage, low res, time-stamped, shot from a hallway inside a hospital. The camera showed a woman in a wheelchair being pushed into a secure psychiatric wing. She looked frail, hair cropped short, wrists bandaged. The name on her chart, Olivia Maddox Live. Or the only person helping him, the only person still alive who understood, and now she had been taken. He raced to St. Clair's Medical Center in Midtown, one of the city's private psychiatric facilities. The security desk blocked him at first, but a badge and enough pressure got him through. "Patient was admitted just after 3:30, said the nurse. "Out by ambulance." No family listed. Brought in under Directive 14A. What's 14A? Whitaker asked. She blinked. Court-mandated psychiatric hold. National security exemption. His stomach dropped. Someone had invoked federal authority to remove her. Silence as compliance. He found her in room 512, behind plexiglass. Eyes wide but unfocused. She sat on the bed with her knees pulled up, rocking gently. He called her name. She didn't respond. He pressed his hand to the glass. She turned toward him slowly. In her lap, torn from a notebook, lay a folded piece of white paper. She looked at it, then at him, and mouthed a single word. Run! Detective Sean Whitaker stood frozen outside room 512. Through the glass, Liv sat motionless, cradling the folded paper in her lap like it was a living thing. Her eyes were no longer blank, but they weren't her eyes either. They held recognition, but not just of him, of something far worse. The message had reached her, and it had taken hold. He pressed the intercom button. Liv! It's me. Look at me. You have to fight this. Her voice was quiet, hoarse. I'm already past that. She turned the paper over once, twice, then slowly began to unfold it. Whitaker shouted, slammed the button again. Don't read it, don't. But it was too late. She looked down, and then she smiled. Not in peace, not in fear, in absolute knowing clarity. A nurse came down the hall in response to the alarm. She was followed by 2 orderlies in white coats. So we're going to have to ask you to leave. I'm a detective. This is a crime scene. This is a secure psychiatric facility. You don't have jurisdiction here. They pulled the emergency shade down over the plexiglass. And just like that, Liv disappeared, erased from view, from access, from protection. Whitaker stormed down the hall, past the elevators, past the nurse's station, and down into the garage. He sat in his car, engine off, phone in hand. 1 missed call. Unknown number. He hit redial, a click, then a voice. Not masked, not synthetic, just calm. Human. Detective. You weren't supposed to keep pulling. Whitaker didn't answer. We gave you clearance for a reason. You were the only one who could carry the message without being destroyed by it. He gripped the wheel tighter. You killed 4 people. No. We allowed them to see. They weren't ready. And Liv? She tried to replicate the pattern. The voice paused. She failed. Back at his apartment, Whitaker found the envelope on his kitchen table. He hadn't locked the door. He hadn't remembered to. The envelope had no stamp, no writing, just a fold. Clean, crisp. Inside, the 5th note. He unfolded it slowly. There were words this time. Not erased, not hidden, typed in courier. You were the witness. You are now the carrier. This is how it spreads. And beneath it in smaller type, the 6th will come to you, and you will choose. His breath caught. He sat down on the edge of the couch, the room spinning around him. The message wasn't an ending. It was a transfer. He woke at 3 a.m., still on the couch. The note was gone, but on his phone, a video file. No sender, just the title. Initiate 6th. He played it. It showed him, standing on a sidewalk, facing someone else, handing them an envelope. Time-stamped, 2 hours from now. The clock on Sean Whitaker's wall read 1:04 a.m. In less than an hour, he was supposed to be on a street corner he hadn't chosen, in a moment that hadn't happened yet, performing an action he hadn't decided on, handing off an envelope that might kill someone or awaken them. He sat in darkness, the city outside muffled and strange. The note was gone. He hadn't seen it since he fell asleep. But its words were etched into him now. The 6th will come to you, and you will choose. It wasn't elite. It was an obligation.